On this video, I am going to be reading Matthew chapter 7, and I'll try to read through the chapter. And as I read it, do like a running commentary. So we now come to the point in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus is talking about judging others. And notice he says, "Do not judge so that you will not be judged. For in the way you judge, you will be judged. And in the standard of measure, it will be measured to you. So why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log or the 2x4 that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' and behold, the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your eye, and then you will be able, or clearly, to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Do not give that which is holy to the dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces." Notice at this point, Jesus is simply saying, don't judge others. It's sort of interesting when he says, you're going to judge others. Look at yourself first and take the log out of your own eye, and then you'll be able to see to take the splinter out of your brother's eye. It's important that we realize that we need to judge ourselves first and foremost. And if people would do that, rather than picking on other people and taking splinters out, what a wonderful difference it would make. And so it's so important of what Jesus is saying. And then he said, don't take that which is holy and give to the dogs. What I think he's talking about here, don't take sacred things and just throw it out, where the dogs represent mongrel dogs that will run and eat anything that was thrown to them at that time. And the swine would be the pigs that were sort of a despised, unclean animal. You don't give them the very best, or they'll just trample it under their feet. And I think the idea is, don't take the sacred things of the Lord and put them where they're just going to be trampled. There are things that are wonderful and sacred, so why throw it out just to let it be trampled? That's one of the reasons why I stopped having comments on when I put out something on YouTube, because you get all of these comments and you're trying to worship Christ and develop a love relationship that's deeper, and then there's all kinds of negative things that's being put out. So that way, when you put it out and you don't open it up for everybody, it seems to be much better, because we don't want to take that which is precious and just throw it out to be attacked or to be trampled on. So then we come to the prayer, how we are to pray, and the golden rule. Ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be open to you. The Greek means keep on seeking, keep on knocking. And I think he's looking at prayer and being faithful and continuous in prayer. For everyone who keeps on asking receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be open. Or what man is there among you, when his son asks for a loaf, will he give to him a stone? No, he's not going to give him a stone if he's asking for a loaf of bread. Or if he asks for a fish, will he give him a snake? He won't give him a snake, will he? The answer is no. And if you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give good gifts to those that ask him? In other words, the Lord isn't going to give you bad gifts. He loves you, he's saying. And so ask and expect that he'll give you what is good because he loves you. He won't give you a stone if you're asking for bread, and so forth. Uh, so he goes on to say, in everything, treat people the same way you want them to treat you, for this is the law and the prophets. If you want to summarize the law and the prophets, that means all of the Old Testament, the law and the prophets, the Torah and the Nevi'im, then you treat people the way you'd want to be treated. What a powerful thing here. We live in a time where people just mistreat people, and they're not thinking many times, would I want to be treated that way? And this is the golden rule that the Lord is teaching. Then there's the narrow way and the wide gate. Enter through the narrow gate. For the gate is wide, and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. For the gate is narrow or small, and the way is narrow that leads to life, and few there be who find it. In other words, I think he's saying, if you're going to pursue what he's teaching, that's a narrow gate. And as you enter it, you're going to be entering a gate that not too many are entering. Most are entering the other kind of a gate, a broad gate. And very few are going to enter that narrow gate that the Lord is encouraging his disciples to enter, which is talking about the Sermon on the Mount, I think, and what he's teaching. Furthermore, beware of the false prophets. Now he's going to talk about how do you tell when there's a false prophet and a true prophet. Beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, are they? No. Nor figs from thistles. You don't take grapes and gather it from thorn bushes or figs from thistles. So every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. So there's a good tree and a bad tree, and you know it by the fruit. The same is true with those that are, let's say, teachers of the word. Look at their life and see what the tree looks like. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a bad tree produce good fruit. If you have a bad tree, it's not going to produce good fruit. And a good tree is not going to produce bad fruit. And Jesus is driving this home to his hearers and to us today. So every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. And then you will know them by their fruits. I think he's looking at the final judgment. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down. The same thing will happen, I think, in the eternal final judgment, because he goes on to say, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name cast out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Didn't we do all these things, Lord? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. As I read this text, it is a challenge to me to make sure that I'm doing my very best to do what the Lord has asked, because life is short and you have this feeling, I don't want to face the Lord and have him say, well, you did all this teaching and everything, but I don't know you. What is, I think, is interesting as we look at what Jesus emphasizes in Matthew 25. I was hungry, you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was sick and you visited me. So I'm thinking that's probably what he was saying here. And I think that the focus needs to be upon a life of giving and helping and serving others, which should be the outcome of our relationship with him. A loving life that touches others in the way that he will emphasize in 25. Now, that does not save us, but can we say it shows us whether we really know the Lord or not by the way we treat the marginalized or the less fortunate, I think he's saying. Then he concludes with two foundations. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house upon the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. What is that rock? Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them, it's acting upon his words and acting upon him. But everyone who doesn't will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against the house, and it fell. And great was its fall. And of course, at this time, your house built more on a sandy kind of a foundation could easily fall. That's why you need to build it upon a rock where it would stand. And that rock is Christ and what he's teaching us and what he has done for us, but also following the life that he's asked us to live. When Jesus had finished these words, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one having authority and not as the scribes. Sort of an interesting comment. Jesus was teaching them with authority and not as the scribes were teaching them, as the religious rulers, but with authority. It was different. The religious teachers at that time might say, Rabbi so-and-so said this and he got it from Rabbi so-and-so, but Jesus says, I say to you. And he's teaching with that authority that often the scribes did not have. So what a beautiful chapter. It's a warning against judging others. It's the application of prayer and persistency in prayer, following the golden rule, and following Christ is entering into a narrow gate over against the wide gate that leads to destruction. And we need to build our life and show its fruit and be a fruit-bearing tree rather than a negative type tree. And there's two foundations. If we build our life on Christ and on his teachings, it'll be a solid foundation. If we build it otherwise, it'll be like a sandy foundation. And when the storm comes, probably looking at the final judgment, that house that's not built on Christ will not stand. Let us build our life and our spiritual house on that solid rock, which is Jesus Christ. I'm reminded of the song, "On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand." And I remember as a boy when we would go to Bible school, the wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rains came down and the floods came, but that house stood. And then it was the foolish man built his house upon the sand. And we would sing that. The foolish man built his house upon the sand, and the rains came down and the floods came, and the house built on the sand went down. And I remember singing that as a boy in Bible school. So this is a great chapter that touches on these basic themes.